Hi everyone, Bishop Bill Duvendak here, and this is the inaugural episode of a new program, for lack of a better word, that is rolling out on my YouTube channel. It's the Bishop's Library. In this, we are going to review books out of my library to give you a sense of what you can find in various books that are out there. I am a straight talker, as you know, so sometimes I will point out things that are less than friendly, but I want you to have the information so that you can make an informed decision and get the guidance that I never got when I was learning in pre-internet times. So we are going to start with a run of classics. And the first one to start with is the granddaddy of them all, as they say. 3 books of occult philosophy by Henry Cornelius Agrippa. This was compiled in the 16th century by Agrippa. He spent his life compiling all the knowledge that he could find that had to do with occultism, celestial magic, ceremonial magic, natural magic, and he put it into 3 books. Yes, this is a 1-volume compilation and everything's in there. It's a softcover that was published by Llewellyn many years ago. But in the recent past, Llewellyn also came out with a slipcover deluxe edition hardback set where the books are all split into their individual volumes. You don't need the fancy version to get started, although it is fun to have. And if this is not still in print, it is easy to find online, so it should be no problem getting a copy for your own personal library. What Agrippa did at the time was revolutionary. He dedicated his life to collecting this information, and this was right about the time of the printing press. I point that out because it meant the distribution of this brought people and communities together to share the spiritual roots of what would become the Western esoteric tradition. In this book, the book, not one of each one of the 3, Agrippa gives us the foundational book. Everything you need to know about where the Western esoteric tradition comes from is contained in here. The book of his that has the most practical information, shall we say, or the most detailed information is book 3, where he talks about such topics as natural magic, Goetia, necromancy, the Kabbalah, but also mathematic magic. And I point that out because that's a topic that is not commonly talked about still to this day. He makes it a point to show how mathematics are part of magic, therefore also part of nature, which we now know scientifically. And what's interesting to me is that he has necromancy in here. Now, a lot of people might think that in a book that has to do with celestial forces and divine wisdom, necromancy doesn't have a place because of its current connotations of being evil or dark. But that is a relatively new idea and one I do not agree with. Even Leonardo da Vinci, the great thinker and inventor, in his private journals pointed out that alchemy and necromancy are basically flip sides of the same coin. They kind of go together like the Taoist yin yang. So if you're going to talk about the alchemical arts as being an approach to dealing with the forces of life, then talking about the necromantic arts as being necessary to deal with the forces of not only death, but also the invisible world. So you can see how there's a strong correlation here between Da Vinci's thinking and Agrippa's research and material. Keep in mind that some of this will be dated as you read it. Scientific discoveries have multiplied since his time, and things that we used to believe were true, we have discovered they are false. But in some way, tradition and principles are timeless, as Dion Fortune points out in a book of hers that we'll talk about at some point down the road. The example that best illustrates this is having a balanced diet. The idea of eating well is something that goes back a very, very long time. But our hands are kind of tied when it comes to picking our food. In Agrippa's day, everything was fresh, everything was grown on a farm or in a garden. Nowadays, you can get stuff at a supermarket. The difference is, back then there were less chemicals on the food because chemicals didn't exist. And now we've got chemicals that act as preservatives and growth hormones. And the reason that we have this is because we're transporting food over larger distances than we had before. And there's more people alive on the planet. So the principle here that is still at work is having a balanced diet. But what that looks like and how we achieve that is much more subjective and in some ways more modernized. I'm not going to say it's better. I'm just saying it's different, and it's built on the backs of what has come before. This idea illustrates that you can have timeless principles that don't necessarily roll out today as they have in the past. In his 3 books, Agrippa, well, he basically talks about anything and everything. The first book talks about sacred laws and magic in general. The second book talks a little bit more about philosophy, so he goes into magical thinking, which I know is an idea that has been under attack and scrutiny in the last few years for some toxic reason. And the third book gets into the nuts and bolts of magic, and the appendices that come with that are where we really see the gems. It's the third book that talks about the Kabbalah. It's the third book that talks more about Abramelin number squares, and therefore lays the foundation for sigil magic on down the road. When you're first starting off, I encourage you to start with this. Some things you'll resonate with, some things you won't, but by the time you get done with it, you will have a firm understanding of what has come before and where we're at now. The way that I have used this, to be perfectly candid about it, is that I have not sat down and read the whole thing all the way through. Instead, what I have done is gone to the chapters and the concepts that I needed at the time, and in that way, I have worked through all of the material. It's interesting because the more that I walk this path, the more I think I have come across something new, but it was in Agrippa's 5 centuries ago. Or I do come up with something new and realize that the principles of that new idea were laid down in Agrippa's work. So I could refer back to it if I ever get too hung up on the details of the here and now. Anyway, like I said before, this is still pretty readily available. If it's not in print, it's easy to find an inexpensive used copy of it. There's also the deluxe edition, the hardcover slipcases, where the books are split into 3 for those of you that are collectors. But regardless, I encourage you to start with this as your occultism expands. And now you also have a taste of what we're going to be doing here on this segment. So, watch for more videos in the near future. I will continue to focus on the classics for a few episodes before we move forward. So if you have enjoyed this, remember to click like, subscribe, and share.